In this letter from the American Public Health Association to the EPA administrator, the goal is to try to communicate a series of recommendations for managing toxic substances and risk management steps. And what's interesting about this letter is that instead of taking an ABT kind of an approach, what it does is it uses the inverted triangle structure repeatedly to try and clearly identify each of the recommendations that they're advocating for and to provide a little bit of evidence for each one. And you can see that structure in the way that they laid out the letter, but also in the way they used selective bolding in the letter to highlight the core central messages that they wanted to get across. So if we look at this letter, you see, so you've got this introductory paragraph up here, I appreciate the opportunity to comment on this, etc. And then it sets up the problem, right? APHA has called for restructuring, and we urge the EPA to seize this opportunity to strengthen risk evaluations conducted by the agency and risk management steps. And so they've got recommendations listed below, and we want the EPA, or at least they want the EPA, to be considering each of these recommendations. Now, this paragraph here is a little bit more background. I'm going to sort of skip over it, but I want to focus your attention on each of the sort of core body paragraphs. And what you see here is that each one of them is an inverted triangle, where the main central message is not only the first sentence in the paragraph, but it's been bolded. So in this paragraph, we see up here, the EPA should assess aggregate exposures within and across populations, resulting from all current and legacy uses of a chemical substance to avoid underestimating risk. And all of the rest of the paragraph is about supporting this idea. So you've got an example here with asbestos. You've got another example here in terms of workers being exposed, etc. These are all supporting facts backing up the core idea of why aggregate exposures should be assessed related from both current and legacy uses of a chemical substance. In the next paragraph, same structure, right? So here's our main point. The EPA should conduct hazard identification by following systematic review processes that integrate animal, human, and mechanistic evidence. And again, the basic idea here is to provide support. And so what do we have here? We have a National Academy of Science recommendation that backs this up. Same thing in the next one. EPA should follow recommendations from the National Academy of Sciences to identify vulnerable subpopulations based upon established risk factors that increase susceptibility or exposure. What do we need from that? Well, maybe the ideas of the vulnerable subpopulations. Okay, well, we've got children, we've got pregnant women, etc. Again, providing the background information, the supporting facts for the core idea. But again, each of these paragraphs is following this inverted triangle structure. Couple more, same thing happening. Here we go in bold. EPA should use health protective defaults if the agency lacks information, etc. So, what do we have? Another for example. EPA routinely applies safety or uncertainty factors of 10, etc. The idea here is to go within current EPA practice to, again, provide the supporting idea behind the recommendation that they're putting forth. Last one down here. EPA should require claims of confidential business information be fully substantiated by industry and not used to conceal critical information from the public. And again, same idea. Why do we need to do this? We need the background. Well, let's see. If a risk evaluation relies upon information withheld from the public, you're going to have a problem. And that's the supporting evidence behind all of this. Notice that they then wrap up by simply saying, look, the recommendations outlined above will help ensure that the agency conducts risk evaluations that fulfill this mandate. Right? This is the why should you pay attention to this clause. But the core idea here has already been stated. So this whole letter is basically an inverted triangle structure with each subparagraph also following that inverted triangle.